Hello and welcome to Dry But Wet's Meet the Maker, a series of conversations with the very clever folk who are breaking new ground by creating incredible tasting, adult, non-alcoholic beverages. Now this is less about the how and more about the why. We're getting to know the makers behind the brands, discovering their motivations and hopefully replicating a little of the storytelling we're so familiar with from the wine industry. I'm your host, Amy Armstrong, of Dry But Wet, passionate non-alcoholic drinks expert, reviewer, and sober socialite. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the unceded land on which we live, work, and record these conversations. For me, that's the Gunditjmara people of the Maar Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Today on Meet the Maker, I am joined by Loz and Jo. These are the co-founders of Smug AF. Smug is a range of ready-to-drink, non-alcoholic cocktails, a margarita and a mojito. The girls made a very bold choice and burst into the non-alc community with a hiss and a roar and a whirlwind of epic reels on Instagram, well before they had a product ready to purchase. The release of the margarita in late 2021, was very highly anticipated by all and very well delivered on. So welcome, Jo and Loz. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me, where did the motivation to make a non-alc product come from?
I think Loz and I had both been through an experience. Maybe you'll ask us about our sober journeys, but we'd recently come off the back of not drinking for a long period of time. And both of us had the experience of how difficult it is, how much stigma there is attached, how much pressure there is from your networks to not make such a big change, to keep drinking. Can't you just have one more? All of those things. And I think it just got us to thinking about how could we support the people who are more committed to their goals than they are to a hangover. And so we just started talking about all of those issues and came to the conclusion that we needed to offer a beverage because the things that we had been tasting and drinking weren't really hitting the mark for us both. We felt that, especially in the ready-to-drink space, a lot of it seemed very soft drinky or a bit like having flavored water. And we were really missing that experience that comes with a cocktail. The theatre that's available in a cocktail, the way it feels in your mouth, the warming sensation down the throat. Nobody seemed to be delivering on that. And so we felt there was a bit of a gap in the market and maybe we could fill it, despite having no experience.
I was just about to say, you haven't come to this from a consumer goods background or anything, have you?
We have not. I was a business coach before Loz was a coach too and a teacher before that and a sports person. And I was working in the resilience space. And so I had done a lot of research about performance and how do you perform well. And for about 7 or 8 years, what kept coming up was that alcohol was a barrier to sustained performance, to being able to flourish in life and fulfill your potential. I mean, I used to coach my business clients all the time to cut alcohol when we had big projects on the line.
Yeah.
So we came at it from a consumer perspective and the people experiencing wanting to do so much more with their lives, but getting a bit caught in the rut that alcohol can create.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I certainly know from my perspective, you can be in that rut and not even know that you're in it.
Totally unconscious, right?
Yeah. It's not till you're out of it and then you're like, holy crap.
Yeah.
I could have been living so much more.
Totally. We don't usually put our lack of energy down to the booze we had last night or on the weekend or whatever else. And so, I think really we just didn't want to die with our potential intact. I think that's right, isn't it, Loz?
Yeah, exactly.
So you've both got sort of like you're sitting on different planes in terms of actual sobriety, aren't you? So Jo, you don't drink at all anymore?
Yeah.
And Loz, what's your story?
Well, I choose to be sober curious and a mindful drinker. So sober curious means I take big stints where I don't drink, or a couple of months at a time. And then there might be an event where I do want to have a drink and I take a mindful drinking approach. So very conscious of my intention behind my drinking. Why am I drinking in this moment? And then actually being conscious between each drink. And that's the hard part, is being conscious between each drink about, why do I really want this next drink and where is that going to lead, and sort of playing the tape forward. It does take a lot more energy to do what I do compared to, say, just cut out alcohol completely. That's probably easier. I put in inverted commas because they all have their challenges, but it takes less mental capacity probably than what the way I choose to have alcohol in my life. But that works for me. And I think being on this journey with Jo and with Smug, who knows whether this will stay like this, or if I decide to never drink again in a year's time or 2 years' time. But right now, where I'm at, it's like I'm really comfortable with my relationship with alcohol. And I feel like I control alcohol rather than alcohol controlling me, which was a space that I wasn't in before.
Yeah. I hear ya. But I can imagine that it does take, I know when I was trying to moderate, it was like so much energy, all those little micro decisions that you're constantly having to make. And that alcohol by its nature, removes your ability to have that control. So when you're 2 drinks in or 3 drinks in, it's like,
it's so true.
It's all out the window.
And there has been we've been doing this for over a year now, but in that time, there was one time where I didn't have control, and it was almost like I needed that reminder. It was I had that, and I felt so rubbish. It was 3 days to recover, and in the moment, it was really fun. But I remembered why I did this in the first place, because the fun in the moment doesn't outweigh the sacrifice you have to make for the next week to feel good again and to get back on track and to have your brain working again. That's the part that frustrates me the most, is the brain fog. Look, and that may happen again. I'm not planning on it, but that is the nature of alcohol. Like you said, that's what happens, and that's why it can be so hard to moderate.
Yeah. So what makes you both so passionate about what you're doing?
I think for us, probably where we are aligned is understanding how hard it is to stop drinking. And Loz had a scare with her dad being unwell. So there's a pretty strong driver underneath there, isn't there, Loz, as well, to help people understand. But, it's easy to think when you're in the alcohol-free space that everybody is onto this. Everybody's sober curious and we're all doing it. We all understand how toxic alcohol can be. But the truth is that's a very small percentage of the population that understands that. Yeah. So I think we're both driven by wanting to inspire and educate people, inspire them enough to take a look at their relationship with alcohol to see how it might be affecting, their overall life, wanting to educate them so they can make an informed choice. And hopefully we entertain people along the way. I mean, Lauren is classic at helping people to have fun with it. We were really committed that our brand was fun when we entered this space. There's a lot of earnest, very serious stuff going on in the space, and that really wasn't, we were trying to also fill the void of the lack of fun. So hopefully we're doing that well.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I get out of bed every day, and this business is difficult. There's no straight lines at all. Sometimes it feels like we are in a whirlwind of chaos. So the reason I get out of bed is just to keep pushing for that people flourishing, and that a possible way to flourish is to at least reduce the amount of alcohol, or understand how to control it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it different for you, Loz, in any ways? I think we're pretty aligned mostly on that.
Yeah, very aligned on that. And I think for me, it's probably about opening up, educating more people. I think that's why we really wanted the brand to be fun. So it was accessible. It didn't come across as preachy or kind of shaming people for having alcohol, or even like demonizing alcohol. We wanted it to be a place where people could, feel that they could maybe have a couple of drinks and switch over. And we're all about, reduction is a great step in the right direction, right? So we really wanted try and create that space. So that really motivates us with our content and the way we kind of position ourselves. We want to make sure we're very inclusive and not judgmental of people's choices. Yeah.
And I think you've done a wonderful job with that. I mean, the brand is so fun, it is so inclusive, and the fact that you've made it so personal, I think, like you have kind of shared along the way, Loz, like when you did have that big, that big blowout. I mean, you came straight on and you were so crook. And you were really frank about that, and I think that definitely helps a lot of people who can identify with that, and that helps them on their journey as well.
Yeah.
So when you're at this stage, you're like, right, we've got a gap in the market, we're gonna throw our hand in and try cocktails. What made you choose cocktails over, say, doing a wine or a something else in the category?
Loz?
Well, you know what? Like, we love wine, so wine would have probably been a very logical choice, except, like we said, we had no experience whatsoever, except that I really love making cocktails. I used to make alcoholic ones. I was a bartender when I was in uni, and so cocktails also was a bit of we had probably a little bit more knowledge in that area. But also when we did our market research on what was out there, there was no ready to drink cocktails. There was, G&Ts, there was Aperol spritzers, there was, there was wine already, there was beer, but there wasn't really a cocktail. And we were like, you know what, we want to, a lot of us, both of us being women, and when we go out to have dinner, what do you start with? You start with a cocktail, and being able to replicate that experience of having a cocktail, we were like, that is definitely a niche there. There's something there that's not being filled. So that was kind of from a logical point of view where we went. And as the brand is growing, like, you won't see us do a G&T. Like, we won't do a mixer and a spirit. So we will always do, which, makes it quite expensive for us, but we will always do kind of complex flavor profiles. So, when you're doing a mojito, you've got to get that right mint, you've got to get the right lime, you've got to get rum, you've got to get the soda water, you've got to get the texture. All of those things need to be to create a cocktail. And the thing with a cocktail, you go to a bar and it forms its own flavor. So you use all these different ingredients and together they form a mojito, and that has a particular flavor profile. But within that, there's multiple things that you're trying to match.
Yeah.
So it becomes quite confusing, also expensive. Like, our mojito alone has 18 ingredients in it. Like, it's a very big recipe. But we kind of wanted that. We wanted boutique. We wanted high end. We wanted something special, right? It's like a special drink. It's the drink on a Friday when you've had a massive day and you've earned your non-alcoholic margarita. Like, you just feel like you need that. That's where we wanted to go. Yeah, you won't see us do the mixes. We'll always stick to our cocktail. And the other probably motivator was that when we did the research, a lot of things there were cocktails, they were called cocktails, right? They were cocktails, but they were botanical based or their own version of a cocktail. And for us as a consumer, when we tried those things, they were very random flavors, like things we'd never really tried before. And it was like, oh, this is weird. We wanted known flavors that we could try and go, I know this is going to taste like a margarita. I know I like a margarita, so therefore I'm going to like that drink. So that was a really big thing for us to have that known flavor.
Yeah. Do you think that there was a reason why no one was doing cocktails?
Yeah.
Yes. This is bloody hard.
Bloody hard. Exactly. There's 100%, Amy. When we started, we were like, why has this never been thought of? We are genius. And then we started down the track, and the first formulator is like, he just looked at us like this, like, are you kidding? And we're like, oh, we also want low sugar. We want low calories. And he was like, you girls are going to kill me.
I think the other thing too, Amy, for us now being we're a year in, and in terms of the competitive landscape, it's harder for the big guys to go and make a cocktail like we're making as well. So what you're seeing now, Gordon's have now brought out their own gin, and they do it really cheaply. So all of those beautiful boutique alcohol-free gins that have been in the marketplace are now struggling, and they're in a price war with a Gordon's, who can come in and just offer it up really cheaply. It doesn't matter to them. You know, they can de-alcoholize their
loss leader for them, right? It's just
and so the beer companies can do it, the wine people can do it, the spirits can do it, and you know, I can see now. We really didn't know this then, but it's something that's a little bit harder for them to get a recipe together and to innovate. Those bigger companies aren't as good at innovating. And so we're hoping that protects us in some ways. I think eventually we'll have to worry about it, but hopefully by then they'll just buy us instead of trying to compete.
Yeah. With those big companies, it almost feels like they're just relying on their name rather than being bothered to put the effort into making it quality. Like Gordon's is literally a whole bunch of chemicals in a bottle. And to me, that's what it tastes like. I think it's
very lemony, isn't it? It's very
it tastes like cordial to me, the bad cordial. But for a lot of people who are just giving it a crack, and it's in Coles, it's easy to get, you know, just we didn't want to be in that price war. We don't want to be in that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can tell how much love and effort you've put into your cans. I mean, when you taste them, that Margarita you've nailed it so completely. I mean, I haven't tried the version 2.0 of the Mojito yet, but I'm very much looking forward to it.
You can tell the difference, I think, in the effort that's put into the drink. And like we formulated for 10 months before we ticked off the Margarita, and even longer for the Mojito. Like the Mojito is especially hard because of the mint. It's very hard to replicate a garden mint. So it was a very tricky project. I was actually talking to Tyler from Yes You Can on the weekend, and he was saying they looked at trying to make a Mojito at the start and they gave up because it was just too hard. So it does take time. It does take, like, both of us, you know, we are perfectionists, especially. We always wanted the drink to come first. Like, or we're self-funded. We've put all of this in, all of our own money. And it was always like, the drink is the most important thing. Everything else can come second. We put everything into the drink. And because we figured that if people like it, that's the main thing. It's going to have to be a really good drink.
Yeah. The quality of the drink will sell itself. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, it is difficult because you are playing in such a new space. I mean, this is really, all these advancements they're sort of happening on the fly, and you guys literally have been making it up as you go along with your formulator. We're not relying on things that we know and that already exist from the alcohol industry. So what have been, I mean, I know you've faced a fair amount of challenges in your 12 months. What have been some of the bigger ones for you?
You can talk about it.
I would have to say the biggest challenge has been production.
Yeah.
It's a tricky industry, the can and co-packing industry. It's not very slick, professional, let's say. I don't know how to, you know, they haven't had to be. And I think they're under a lot of pressure at the moment. That whole industry is under a lot of pressure because there's so much innovation happening. You know, even the can structure from Aurora, it's not really designed to carry these new style of drinks with low pH where they're quite acidic and they can, you know, melt the can, you know. So I think there's a lot of challenges in that way. We started in the middle of COVID where aluminium prices are going through the roof. You know, supply chains are clogged at best. That's like the best way I can say it. You know, we've had to learn how to build up those relationships from scratch. And there's a masses of competition to get onto these canning lines, and there's only so many. So, and it's not easy to move between them. So it's not like we could pick up our operation and go to somewhere else because they do things slightly differently. The format's different, or the box is different, or the labels are wrong, or, you know, it's just that part has been probably the most painful of our learning experiences. But, you know, everybody tells us that whenever you're making anything, it's always the same. So it's not as though we are the only ones dealing with this. But certainly production has been the hardest. And then there's a flow-on effect then. You can't focus on sales. You can't go and do sales deals with anybody because you're not quite sure about your production. So we're just sort of coming through that now, ready to put more attention into sales.
Yeah.
And you're both living in different states of Australia. Like you're in New South Wales and Jo, you're in Queensland. When you first decided to launch a drinks company together, what was like, how were you ever going to manage that?
I think, you know what, COVID probably was a blessing in the fact that it proved that you didn't need to be in the same room to make it work. Like, you know, we're all in 3 different states right now. We're having a conversation and we use Zoom a lot. My most dialed number is Jo over anybody else. Like, we're constantly on the phone. I think, you know, ultimately we would love to work in the same space because we do work so well together. We feed off each other's energy, getting so much more productive, fun time. Like, that's probably the hardest part, is to keep everything fun when you only ever call each other to kind of figure out an issue. Whereas like if you're working together, it'd be like, okay, let's do a reel together, or let's, you know, film some content down going for a walk, or, you know, there's that way to just make everything a little bit more fun. But in saying that, we've made the best of a very hard situation. Like, our production team is in Melbourne, so we've literally been across. We really like to spread the love in Australia.
You have all across the state.
Yeah, that's been a challenge, but it's definitely, you know, it's not impossible for sure.
Yeah.
At least we're on the same sort of time zone now, thanks to daylight savings.
Yeah, that's over. That would have just added another just like little layer of complexity that you didn't really need.
Booking meetings, and all of a sudden I'm like, Jo's an hour early. I'm like, we're not just.
And I always felt like I was behind. I'd wake up in the morning and go, I'm already behind. You know, it was, I didn't like that feeling.
Yeah. Anyway. So I think you may have already sort of answered this without answering it, but like, we now know that it's been a year in the making, getting to the point where you're happy with the drink enough to release it. People often comment on the price of non-alc, like, why is it so expensive if it doesn't have alcohol, and why are we not paying? Why is it not the same price as soft drink? What's your response to that?
I think that's definitely an education piece. And I think if I think back to when we first started, we had the exact same thought. That was literally in our conversation when we started. We were like, why are we paying the same amount as alcohol? It has no alcohol and it tastes like soft drink. So we had that. So I totally understand where that comes from. Now that we're in it, and I think we understand how much goes into it. I think it was we really wanted to make sure that we have non-alcoholic spirits in our drinks. And we wanted to make sure that we actually called that out and actually showed people that we've already put all of these in, that the quality is already in the can. And like I was saying before about the complexity of the drink. So our, you know, even dosing our margaritas with nitrogen, like, we have really spared no expense when it comes to producing the drink, putting high quality non-alcoholic tequila in there, making sure it's got everything in there that a quality cocktail would have. But with that comes expense. So it really, our brand, we've put everything into it, and that ends up being more expensive, I suppose. Jo, do you have anything to add?
Well, the only thing I would add is that unlike a Coke, which is, if you compare us to a soft drink, which is kind of unfair anyway, but Coca-Cola is making millions and millions and millions of cans every month, right? And they have this economies of scale that are available to them. We are much more like a boutique or a craft product. You know, I think people, if they could think of us a bit more like a handcrafted product, it's probably closer to what it really is. And we're hoping that we can build it enough that we can create some economies of scale, but it's, unfortunately, that's just the nature of the business.
You got to sell more in order to make more.
Exactly.
We've got so many fun recipes, awesome recipes that we've already formulated that are literally sitting there. We just need to, you know, get everything moving and sell what we've got and create that momentum so that we can back ourselves. Because each recipe, and I don't know, you probably heard this with your other people that you've interviewed, but it's such a massive capital business. Like you have to outlay for every ingredient, say the mojito that's got 18 ingredients. Each one of those ingredients has what they call an MOQ, so a minimum order quantity that you have to buy, irrespective of how much you use. You could use 500 grams of this stuff and you have to buy 15 kilos. So you have to purchase all these MOQs. So the outlay to just get a product out is so massive. And you're not really seeing that return until you've made maybe 3 or 4 batches of the stuff, right? So we've got some exciting stuff that we really want to bring out, but we just have to keep proving, one, that there's people that want it, that there's people that love it, and that people are willing to pay them money for it, so that we can then back it and give all these awesome recipes.
Yeah. If I was going to guess what your next recipe, if I could guess what your next recipe was, would you tell me?
No.
But I want to hear you guess.
Well, my guess is that you do an espresso martini.
Ooh. That, just so you know, technically that is such a hard drink.
Are you saying that because you know from experience?
We know. We have some experience. It is really hard. And even the guys who make the alcoholic versions, and we've heard stories of their whole batches just blowing up in the can. It's technically a very difficult drink to make.
Why would they blow up? What is it? Because
it's
of
the level of the coffee.
Yeah.
And the fact that, so if we were to make that, because all of our drinks are preservative free, we have no colors or any kind of, we would have to put a preservative in that drink. You wouldn't be able to make it without it.
Yeah.
Because of the pH level and the acidity of the coffee, and it's the bacteria that can grow within the drink.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've looked into it, but it's a very technical drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, we would love to have one in the range. It's just very hard to make.
Yeah, right. So in the too hard basket for now.
Well, watch this space.
Yeah.
So with you working preservative free, I imagine that's adding a whole other layer of complexity to what you're doing, because you don't have the alcohol there to act as a preservative. So
there is something that gets added, but it breaks down to a natural product. So but not every canning operation offers that. So it's a special process and ingredient. I call it ingredient, but it doesn't really show up inside the drink. It's
more of a process. Yeah.
And so we're having trouble at the moment because the companies that we're looking into don't offer that. So it's one of those very tricky, we have to really think about, what does that say about our brand? Are we okay with that? What are we going to do?
that's a big decision.
It's one of the quirks of producing alcohol-free drinks.
Yeah. It seems like you've had so many learnings along the way on this journey, like looking back to when you started and you had those discussions. What if you could tell yourselves, one big thing back then, what would it be?
I'd say it's going to be harder than you think it is. I think we both came in with rose-colored glasses because we've had, we've both had success in our careers and both very capable humans. And we were like, we're going to be out for dry July. We're going to be like doing all this stuff. We're going to get this. And we just thought that the seas would part and we would just walk through the middle. That didn't happen. So I think I'd probably warn myself that it's going to be harder than you think.
Yeah. Did you get to a point sort of the midway through last year when things were taking a lot longer that you were like, I wish we hadn't gone on and launched the brand so early?
No. I think we wished we had chosen differently from a production perspective. That's what
I was going to say. Yeah. You can't learn those things either, can you, Jo? Like, we weren't to know what the experience was going to be like working with them. So, I think, I'm glad we launched the brand early. Like, I think the community, say, like, meeting all these people in the space, that's actually what's helped us so much because, we launched sold out of margaritas, sold out of mojitos. As soon as they hit the ground, they were gone. Like that kind of following is what's helped us to even be where we are right now, which is amazing.
So you've
I think having to stay in touch with everybody while we were waiting for those mojitos. I mean, we pre-sold them. It took 4 months. It was meant to take 3 weeks. And it taught us how to stay in communication and how to, keep showing up even when things weren't working. And I think that was good for us, even though there were weeks we were like, oh my God, what are we going to tell them this week? But we just kept showing up.
Email saying another thing's gone wrong. Like I kept thinking, people are going to think we're lying. Like it was like, surely this is like another event, another thing. Oh.
Yeah.
So there's been a few hurdles. What have been some of the really positive surprises that have come out of this journey for you?
I would say the community.
Yeah.
I can't get over. I mean, the community you created, Amy, with Sam has been one of the most nurturing, nourishing, surprising results that we could have imagined. And in fact, I did a live interview on Sunday night, and that's what I talked about was the community that you and Sam created.
Amazing.
And I haven't experienced anything like that in business before. So despite things being difficult, the fact that there are, 30 odd women available and willing to support us in anything. I mean, we had a production issue the other week. I put it into that chat and I had 4 or 5 different answers about how to handle the situation. I can't even put a price on that. It's been incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the whole sober community at large is just so incredibly supportive. Like it's amazed me that I haven't had any negative experiences, touch wood, to date. Like I've had, on Instagram, I've had no one coming and giving me grief about anything. And I think that's really unheard of in general in social media. And I think it's just a really big reflection on the sort of community that is available to us and how positive and supportive everyone is of one another, regardless of whether they're sober or sober curious or just nosy, So you've got drinks that you want to make. You're sort of in this building process. Where do you see Smug in 5 years' time? Or where do you hope Smug to be in 5 years' time?
That's an exciting question. I would love to be able to see Smug at most restaurants. Like if I went to a restaurant and I sat down and I want to have, like, it's still so rare to have a quality non-alcoholic option at a restaurant.
Preach.
I went out last night with my family to dinner, nothing except a big company beer was available. And it was like, that's where I want to see Smug. I want to be able to go and have a quality non-alcoholic option available. And I would love that. That would be amazing. Jo, where do you want
to? Everywhere. Events, I want to see up to in-company events, where corporates are holding their, Christmas drinks or whatever, and they're actually offering up decent alcohol-free options. Not just us, but other options as well, the wines, the sparkling, all the things. I was in a group the other day, one of the alcohol-free groups that I'm in, and a lady was saying how hard it was because she was staying at this big chain hotel, like a fancy chain hotel, and they just sent up free champagne, and she's trying not to drink. And they didn't ask, they didn't offer, there was not an alternative. I would love us to get to the place where they are offering up, saying, hi, we're about to send you up some complimentary XYZ, what works for you? Because just assuming that everybody can drink, we're out to change the culture, right? Yeah. That's actually what we're here to do. And if Smug can be part of that movement where in 5 years' time, just the way the way the world of smoking changed so much, man, that would be incredible to be part of that.
Totally.
Have you done much of a push into hospitality yet?
We are just starting. I've just put together some big plans over the weekend because we had to hold the production things. We couldn't really start that. So we are on the journey, just laying down the tracks, and then we're just going to.
Because what I've discovered over the last year or so is that there's a big the reason why a lot of pubs aren't bothering, or venues aren't bothering, is because they're finding it too hard, and because the distribution channels that they're used to aren't really there. And that's sort of the gap that I'm trying to fill at the moment, is to help close that gap and make it easier for the venues to find the non-alc drinks, because at the moment they're like, unless I can get it from ALM, I'm not going to bother.
Right. Yeah.
Which, sucks for the consumer.
Sucks for the consumer, sucks for the boutique brands like us, right? Like we've looked at ALM and we just couldn't really afford to even go in there right now with the way it works and the margins and stuff. It's just, yeah. So finding other ways and other avenues to be able to get in touch with venues and make it easy for everyone, right? It's got to be easy for us. It's got to be automated for us. It's got to be automated for them, and making that seamless. Yeah.
Yeah. Making path to least resistance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, girls, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure to have you here to chat about the story behind Smug and why you're doing what you're doing and how you're doing what you're doing. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you so much.
So remember, for all your non-alcoholic drinks recommendations, head to drybutwet.com.au. Today's lovely chat with the Smug girls brings me to the end of the first season of Dry But Wet Meet the Maker. It's been amazing to connect with some of the best non-alcoholic producers around the world. There are plenty of chats to dive back into. I've had amazing chats with the producer of Oddbird Sparkling Wine, Naughty Sparkling Wine. We've had Jazz from Naught, heaps normal guys. So there's so much to catch up on. So you can jump back in at any time and stay tuned for season 2. In the meantime, you can keep up with all your non-alc related content and me on Instagram at Dry But Wet.